Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transfer News Central podcast. I'm Johnny Bentley, your host, and for once, I'm actually outshone by my guest. I'm only joking, that usually happens, but one of the, I think the quintessential commentator for certainly my time, my lifetime, the voice of terrestrial television sport, the voice of FIFA, Mr. Clive Tyldesley. I'm absolutely delighted to be on here with you.
I hope I can live up to that.
Yeah, now it's your turn, Clive. No, I'm only joking. I mean, first of all, it's you know, as I say every time we do a podcast like this, it's unprecedented times at the moment. We've had stay at home. We initially started as the stay at home series of podcasts. That's now changed to the stay alert series of podcasts, obviously, to stay in touch with our government guidelines. I hope you haven't been making any trips to Durham, Clive. But other than that, how's it been for you at the moment? How is life in general?
Well, I didn't vote for him. Let's get that straight to begin with. Neither did I vote for Brexit. Let's get that straight. So Barnard Castle jokes kind of fall a bit flat with me. I don't think it's very funny, but there you go. I'm happy and healthy. Feel very fortunate to be in a situation where I can self-isolate with my best friend in the world, my wife. We have 4 children who are all in their 20s. They're all in work. They're all in London. One of them has had the virus, but has recovered well. I mean, I would like to be commentating on football matches. You would like to be watching football matches. We would like to be talking about the Champions League final this weekend, but we're not. And there are more important things happening in the world. And, you know, I think we've all pretty much tuned into that, or most of us have tuned into that when these guidelines are imposed upon us, we obey them in order to keep each other alive.
No, your wife just went past in the background there, Clive. I just think I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, I was just telling you before that your initial reply to my email went in the spam box. Initially, I thought it may have been spam, maybe it was my bad eyesight. In which case, of course, I should have gone for a short drive to clear my vision up. But we'll get away from that now. We'll get away from those jokes. Actually, just before we do move on, I have to say you've been involved in sport for many years. You've seen many interviews, and you've probably seen some really excruciating interviews in your time, firsthand, and you know where this is going, and at a distance. How does did any of the interviews that you've seen firsthand or at a distance rank with what you saw yesterday with Dominic Cummings at 4?
I wrote a column in the build-up to the last election, which caused a bit of a stir. I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about the quality of television political journalism. I think it's been really poor for the last 3 years. And I actually argued that I think that the level of scrutiny and investigation would have been more revealing in a football environment. I think the football media would have covered this story better. And I think that 1 or 2 things that have been allowed to happen would not have been allowed to happen. And that I finished up on some Radio 4 program with Kay Burley defending her, and actually who I actually think is quite, who is good, experienced, and is front foot. But I'm not a fan of Beth Rigby, Robert Peston, Laura Kuenssberg, I'm afraid. I think that they're stuck in the Westminster bubble. I think that football, I think that covering football is easier in so much that I think your audience understands the basics of the subject better than we do, you know, for instance, the pros and cons of leaving the EU. But then that's the journalist's job to actually explain this rather than turn it into some kind of reality show between personalities, which I think is what politics has become to too many people in the last 3 years. And what's happened? The country switched off. The country became bored of Brexit, the most important decision that the country will take in a generation. People became bored of it. They just wanted it over. They just wanted, no, well, that's it. But I mean, you do know we're going to be worse off economically. Well, I don't care. I just want it over with. It's the thing about Turkey is voting for Christmas. It was the Turkey that could see Christmas coming and thought, well, what the heck? There's no point in me protesting anymore. Let's just get it over with. Put me in the oven. And I think that the media, the news media, allowed that to happen. And I don't think it would have happened with the sports media. I think there's more scrutiny in the sports media, and so. Even the Cummings interview, where actually I think under bitter pressure, the main television political correspondents became more strident. I still think they missed that kind of forensic cross-examination, which he is now getting from Keir Starmer. He's now getting from a barrister. The actual detail of, can your wife drive? Well, could your wife not? Nobody asked in how long? Over an hour? Or couldn't your wife have driven? We never established those basic facts. On the Sunday night when the Prime Minister spoke, nobody specifically asked him, yes or no, did Cummings go to Barnard Castle? That would have happened in a football press conference. Here ended the lesson.
Honestly, Clive, I think that's really refreshing, because so many times, even with people in your particular business, I think there'd be a certain trepidation. We're talking like you've just done at length, because you risk a lot of people going, oh, stick to football, which I think is nonsense, by the way. Absolute nonsense.
I get a vote.
Exactly.
I accept the election. The Conservative Party got in by 30 odd seats. No, I mean, that's fantastic. And actually, do you know, of all the alternatives to face this crisis, this may have been the best one for the country, weirdly. And I've been a member of the Labour Party until the last 5 years, for a long, long time. I didn't even vote Labour at the last election. No. So I didn't vote Conservative either, by the way. No. But I mean, I think Brexit was too close to call, and I think that there was a very strong argument for a second referendum once the deal had been struck. I think that's just logic, it's just reason. I'm entitled to an opinion. I don't believe the man who was interviewed yesterday. I don't believe every detail of what he gave, I'm afraid, because it just seems a crazy story. But that doesn't mean that I think he's terrible at what he does. And I can't dislike him because I don't know him. And again, we come into contact in the course of our work with some pretty famous managers who are pretty difficult to interview. I've been very privileged to see some of those people in a totally different environment. I'll tell you a nice little story, which I was at I host a charity golf event for the Robson family. Initially, Bobby Robson has a charity in Portugal. In addition to the cancer charity in the Northeast, he has he supported a children's refuge near Faro from 2004 onwards. I actually travelled to the first event with him down from Lisbon at the European Championships when he was working for ITV. So I know the three boys and Lady Elsie and everything. I became heavily involved with the charity. And I think that I was at a reception of some kind, and I'd interviewed Mick McCarthy a couple of times, and he was there. And so he said, do you know Mick? And I said, yeah, and held out a hand. And he said, no, you don't. And typical Mick being Mick, who's now a very close friend. And he said, no, you don't know me at all. I said, well, I've interviewed after a couple of days. He said, well, that's not Mick McCarthy. He said, that's the guy who just come out of the dressing room. We just got beat 3-0, and you're going to ask me a load of difficult questions. You're not talking to Mick McCarthy. You're talking to the manager of Wolves or the manager of wherever I was. And I am a totally different creature. I am, if you ask me the same questions now over a glass of wine, now we're friends, I'd give you different answers to what I gave you then. So you have to recognize that obviously Dominic Cummings was in a difficult position yesterday. But I do appreciate that. And I don't, the business of, knocking on his parents' door and all that is dreadful, awful. It shouldn't be happening. But these guys in interview situations, when they're professionals, when they're managers, when they're in spotlight, when they're in the scrutiny, they have to put on a shield. They have to put on a different face. And, that obviously it's part of the interviewer's job to try to break through that armor and try to get to the root of it. But if you do, and I'm, who knows, if I met Dominic Cummings, or even, I can't believe it, but even if I met Boris Johnson in a social situation, I might like him. I'm not going to judge him from a distance. but I ain't going to vote for him either.
No, again, brilliantly summarised. I
But
mean,
you can if you want. That's cool.
Yeah. I didn't, by the way, but that's yeah. I'm good thing to note at the end. Other political leaders are available, but we talk about, actually. You talked about before the politics. You were desperate for a return to commentaries and a return to football in general, but also aware of, the surrounding issues that we currently face. One major European league that has returned is the Bundesliga. I think it's going to be entering its third series of fixtures. We've had 2 sets of game weeks already. It's generally passed with flying colours. I watched a few. Did you watch any of the Bundesliga over the past 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, out of interest, probably curiosity as much as anything, because there's every possibility that I'll be commentating on games in similar circumstances within the next month or so. So, yeah, I wanted to get a feel for it. And, when Bayern play Dortmund, then it's just the kind of game I might watch anyway. But it's a passing interest to me at the moment. Curiosity as much as anything. I mean, I think there have been times in my career where, for instance, when ITV had championship rights, and for probably 4 or 5 years, I knew a lot about championship football. At the moment, I don't commentate on any championship football, so I don't follow the championship as closely as I used to do. When England is your main contract, which ITV have, then I probably would be more likely to catch up with some international games of future opponents and so on. I mean, it is a job. I love football. I'm now covering more Premier League in the last couple of years than I've done before. So,
I noticed.
I'm taking a daily, weekly interest in the outcome of the Premier League. But Champions League's been bigger in my life in the last 10, 15 years. So I've probably watched even more Champions League football. Just what I do.
No, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I think the Bundesliga's got the biggest audience that it's had ever globally, because of the curiosity factor, because it's the first major league to return. Credit to Germany and credit to how they've orchestrated this, by the way. When you read into it, this has been over a month of careful planning with lots of different parties, the government themselves, the scientists, the clubs, the various people involved. They've all been talking to each other, talking to the players who were initially reluctant. Some players were initially reluctant to go back. They all got convinced by the plans, which were thoroughly brought out.
But Johnny, the pandemic was nothing like as serious there, because it was managed better. I'm sorry to go back to politics.
Of course.
I mean, they didn't have quite the crisis that we've had.
It's good communication, though, isn't it, Clive? If you communicate well and you across the board, and you say, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to impose these measures. We're not going to have ambiguity. And then, as you say, they impose strict measures from the off. And then and now, if you look at Germany now, I think most shops are open with social distancing rules applied, and obviously football's returning. As you say, they were strict from the off. They were clear with the communication.
Yeah, I'm not being wise after the event. I'm not being wise after the event. I think it's been a very I don't think it has been a very, very difficult situation to manage at all levels. And obviously, the higher the level to go, the greater the responsibility. And to be in government at this moment is difficult. There's no question about that. I mean, I haven't got a lot of kind of professional respect for Matt Hancock, but I do kind of feel for him every time he's pushed out there. What a time to be health secretary. I mean, Jeremy Hunt's looking like the greatest health secretary the world's ever had now. But so I mean, if the headline from this becomes Red Clive lambast the government, that is not. That is not what I'm trying to do. I think it's been really, really difficult. And as I intimated, I much as I've been a Labour supporter all my life, I'm not sure that the last opposition would have handled this situation any better. I think now that I really feel that Keir Starmer's made a very impressive start. I think there are some shining lights in his shadow cabinet, mainly women, who've been really, really impressive so far. And, I think their approach has been respectful and sympathetic of the situation, but they're asking questions that are important. And Ali McGovern, who is the Shadow Sports Secretary, who I'd spent part of my life in Wirral, near Liverpool, and she's from that neck of the woods, and she'll have her say at some stage in all of this, because what we don't want are one of two things really. One, we don't want footballers being foisted, back to work simply to try to raise the national morale. I mean, what? No.
No.
I mean, they were sort of lambasting footballers and their wages 3 or 4 weeks ago. Don't turn to these guys and ask them, to come and distract us from everything else that's happening. That is not their jobs. They get paid a lot of money, but they're wonderful entertainers, mainly from working class backgrounds. They're good guys, most of the ones I've met. So let's not ask them to do that. And I think, secondly, it much as I appreciate that television holds the whip hand in terms of the financing, particularly of something like the Premier League at the moment, and even though I think it's only right that television has a big say in exactly what happens, i.e. That there is some jeopardy in the games, that we still have relegation issues and so on, the games mean something. At the same time, television shouldn't be in a situation where football is coming back simply because it needs the money that television owes them. So it is a difficult situation, and I hope that without getting too heavily involved, I hope that the government agencies make sure that this is managed properly in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, Clive, and you're spot on with everything that you've said. The other reason they're rushing, as we say, to have football back so soon is as you alluded to, financial reasons. We talk about the TV companies not having rights fulfilled, talk about clubs who might lose out on lots of money, which therefore in turn makes it difficult maybe when players' wages come into account later on and then they're supposed to pay the taxes, and then that's supposed to help the economy. It's all sort of affected by financial reasons. As a fan, as a football fan, if you ask me, would you like the season to return in the form of no fans for a longer period of time, or would you rather wait until the fans could return? I'd say the fans to return every single time. I watched the Bundesliga, and albeit I thought there was some lovely football action. I watched Borussia Dortmund last week. Watched Bayer Leverkusen this week. Kai Havertz, what a player, by the way, brilliant talent for Germany. But there's still an emptiness. There always will be. It's getting used to a new normal, as we say, which has been banded around a lot. And I've got absolute massive respect for Germany and how they brought it back and what they're doing with it now, because it's remarkable. As we say, we talk about how well they've done politically, and now they're doing well on the sporting field. So well done to them there. But if finances weren't dictating this decision, and you said to every single fan, do you want football to return to our screens, but with no supporters, so you can't attend? I genuinely think they'd rather wait for the stadiums to be filled again.
I'm not so sure. I mean, I think, Jurgen Klopp has said the most important of the unimportant things, and I think the footballers kind of found that place. I think there is that respect around. There are some footballers who are prepared to speak their mind and talk about their concerns and worries, and fortunately, I think the game is more aware of insecurities among players than it was even 10 years ago. So when somebody like Danny Rose speaks, then we should listen, and I think we are listening. So I think that's important, but I do think that there is, I feel, a need to try to complete the season. And I understand the logistical issue. Well, I understand that there are logistical issues with contracts, transfer windows, and future scheduling and so on. But my personal feeling is that everything should be done to try to complete the fixtures that remain in this season. We're 3/4 of the way through it. And I think everything that should be done to complete those fixtures in some form. And then if any changes need to be made, make them to next season. Yeah, but this season, once this season has been started, then, I think from a credibility point of view, I mean, this has nothing to do with Liverpool or Barrow or Leeds United or anybody's specific. This season, think of all the games that have been staged that people have paid good money to go and watch. Are we seriously going to say, oh, by the way, they're all friendlies now? Well, can we have our money back? You know, I'm sorry, I didn't realise it didn't matter who won or lost. No, I mean, and you know, while I understand that, I mean, democracy is about self-interest, really. What is a democracy? We all vote for what we want, and then most people get what, you know, so that's kind of how it works. But if you're in the bottom six, then I'm sorry, you've got, hopefully we're all going to come out of this a little bit better somehow. You know, a bit more appreciation for the bigger things in life, like nurses. Yeah. And, you know, surely they can see that, I mean, some of the detail of, you know, what happens if our best three players get coronavirus? Well, I'm sorry, you know, that's what happens, you know, and the world isn't, it was never meant to be equal, you know. Some clubs have got far more money than other clubs, the same league. You play against each other. Some have got better squads. It's probably why you're at the bottom in the first place. So I do think that every effort, even behind closed doors, should be made, even on neutral grounds. I've got nothing against that, particularly if that makes it safer for the players. I think that, yeah, that what we've started, every other business in the world has got to pick up where it left off, and somehow try to. And that's what I think football needs to try to do. Most importantly, well, most important of all, obviously keep everybody safe. But in terms of the actual detail of the fixtures, I don't really mind if it takes to September to complete this season, and next season has to become whatever. I mean, you only play each team once, whatever, you know. But make the adjustments to the season we haven't started yet. That would be my look at it.
Well, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, when I was talking about the fans' perspective, that was purely from the entertainment's perspective, and seeing something that's our beautiful game kind of change. I absolutely agree. I've written articles on it that from a business point of view, it absolutely has to return. And for the integrity point of view, it absolutely has to finish. And it's interesting that you say one or two players have coronavirus. Oh no. Well, I'm not trying to undermine that. That's bad. Of course it's bad. We don't want anyone to get coronavirus in any particular part of work. But in the Bundesliga, there were, just before, in the build-up to that, there have been players that have that have gained the coronavirus, that have been contaminated with the coronavirus. And they felt that they treated it a bit like an injury, I suppose. They just said, well, they won't play this week. They go to the side. We will carry on like this, you know, a train that doesn't stop, because we've put all this planning in place. That, you know, if one or two players do get coronavirus, they will be protected from that. They won't spread it to the rest of the squad. They'll be told to go to the side. In the same way, if the player was injured, then, you know, they wouldn't be playing in that particular game week. So,
yeah, I mean, look at Liverpool, who are clearly the best team in the country at the moment. I mean, there was certainly a few games early in the season where they had to play Fabinho at centre-back, didn't they? Because, I mean, they've got 4 centre-backs, but they had 3 injured. And certainly last season, there was a match where they played 2 midfield players, Henderson and somebody else played. It happens. It happens even at the biggest, wealthiest clubs. Now, I think it's a little different if 6 or 8 players. But again, you know, we've seen this without trying to reduce the impact of this particular virus. I mean, we've had matches postponed because of a bout of flu within a camp before. These are the minor I think the minor details, the contracts, the transfer windows, I think we should be able to work through those details. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, I hesitate to say as much as I've said about something that I'm not as informed about as I would be researched and prepped before a game that I'm doing. I don't know enough, really, to have a firm view, and I hope I haven't given a firm view. No. It's just my feeling that in terms of people talk about the integrity of the competition, I think the integrity of the competition is best served by trying to play these fixtures out on a football field somehow.
No, I think that's very fair, and I think the thing that I always think when you, which you referred to a little earlier, was the fact that all other businesses across the world, particularly the UK, are trying to find a way to get back to some kind of normality, again, just for the sake of their own future and their own survival. So looking at it from that business point of view, which the Premier League is, it's a huge financial behemoth of a business. We've got to look at it with those eyes now. And then, you know, it's not about, it's not about saying economy over lives, but it is about trying to find, isn't it, that route back, and not seeing the economy go under as well.
Yeah, and we maybe get a bit dreamy about when this is all over. I mean, there were one or two kind of wartime analogies early on in the piece, which I don't like wartime analogies even in football commentary, let alone at a time of national crisis. But I've never lived through a world war, but at least there have been days, VE Day, when it's over. And then, okay, there are all kinds of problems, economic problems, but it's over. There isn't going to be a VE Day with this. There really isn't. I don't know how long it's going to be before. I mean, everybody's looking back now at that Liverpool Athletic game and the Cheltenham Festival, pointing big fingers. And nobody really knows. Again, I'm not informed enough to have a strong view on that. But looking back, it does seem extraordinary that those events were allowed to take place, given the circumstances. I really don't know when we will see that again. And I'm not even sure. Listen, if football resumes next week and TalkSport call me up and say, look, there's a game at wherever, we want you to commentate on it, that's my job. And as long as the right safeguards are in place, I'll be there. But if they told me to fly somewhere, I'm not sure how much I want to get on an aeroplane with 50, 100 other people at the moment. I'm not sure how much I would want to be in a stadium with 20,000 other people. And it might be a long time before I do want to be. And, I think it is going to be a new normal. It's not, we're not going to get back to the normal. I don't think we are.
No.
This is really teary. This is making everybody feel a lot better. It's your fault, of course, but...
Well, if you watch it before EastEnders, you'll get a double dose of the kind of thing now, won't you? So that's fantastic. No, we're going to lighten it up now, Clive. We're going to lighten up the mood. I'm not usually this dour, but these are the times that we're in. You can't help it. You cannot help it. And I mean, to be honest with you, as much as he is an idiot, I do find some kind of humour with Donald Trump's attempts to liaise with the media. He's an absolute charlatan and a buffoon. However, he does make me he's just become an internet meme, hasn't he? Like, I cannot quite.
You might be watching on a different platform to me.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I think he's an absolute clown.
Too many guffaws during the news in this household.
No, don't get me wrong.
Dangerous.
Of course, I wouldn't want him as my leader, but when he comes out with things like, I take hydroxychloroquine to ease the pain.
Yeah.
You think, well, you don't. You're just advertising.
There should be a transfer market, and we should be trying to buy the New Zealand Prime Minister right now. We really should be in for her. Big time. I mean, if Dominic Cummings wants to, if he wants to come clean with the nation and do us all a favour, put a bid in for her, because she's good.
Oh no, she's fantastic, isn't she? I mean, maybe a loan deal, because we don't want to, maybe through the crisis, we don't want to take New Zealand because she's.
Football. It's a Darwinian world. No, you buy the smaller clubs' best players, and she's their best player. We'll have her.
Shall we give Boris a low release clause maybe, and then sort of offshore?
He can be the British ambassador in New Zealand.
I'm sure it can be.
Part exchange.
I'm sure it will be. Anyway, I mean, you are a renowned commentator, and you have commentated on some incredible events. I do actually think, just before we do go on, would you consider a role as the Speaker in the House of Commons? I mean, you've certainly got.
I didn't like him very much, Berko, either. So I don't
order.
No, I mean, if Carlsberg made politicians, it would be Jess Phillips, wouldn't it? Probably.
When I went to Lancaster University, actually, and one of my we had Cat Smith, who was the Labour MP, and she was a fantastic speaker, really, really in touch with the community around her. I think she's the shadow. I think she's she's not on the front bench, I don't think, unfortunately, but she's a phenomenal speaker. And yeah, for me, she was one of my favourite politicians, certainly at this moment in time. Jess Phillips, I'm not 100% clued up on, but I'll take your word for it, Clive. I'm sure she is a wonderful in her particular job. Anyway, we know that obviously you're not a big fan of Berko, but you will take over House of Commons.
Thank you very much. We're just having a delivery. Thank you.
Is it
It's
a
difficult
Domino's?
times.
Is it a Domino's?
No, it's some Amazon. I should just do the plug really here. We've just set up a little website for prints of the commentary charts. It's called commentarycharts.com. And we've just taken more orders than we expected in the first 2 days. So it's a little bit more packaging to send them all out to you. Thank you for your support. But look it up, commentarycharts.com.
Very good. Very good. Also, yeah, actually, that's on your Twitter as well, Clive. I was having a look before. Phenomenal amount of writing that goes into those, particular things. I was talking to Ian Darke a few weeks ago, and he said every single commentator who does preparations like that has writing so small, but they can only read it themselves, because apparently Derek Ray does writing so small and so in Derek Ray's style that only he could understand what he's written. Yours seemed quite legible, I must say, when I was reading yours. Let's have a look at yours.
Yeah, I mean, the writing's quite small. I think part of it is if you take a pride in how it looks, then quite apart from the information database that you're effectively taking to the game with you, you are taking a kind of psychological prop. It's, I mean, hopefully you only ever use 10 to 15% of the information on there anyway. I mean, it's safety net really. It's there for you. Well, it's how you use them. It's not the compilation of the chart. That's the skill, if you like. It's how you use the information. But also, I think it's just if you look down, 15 seconds before Mark Pugac hands to me or Laura Woods hands to me, whoever I'm working for, and you think, well, you've done your work. You've spent 2 days doing that. Then I think it just gives you a bit of a confidence feel. We all do it a little bit differently. It is strange that most of us probably all went to the same school somewhere. There are a couple. Peter Drury's handwriting is totally illegible. Nobody can read that. I'm not sure he can read it. The late Peter Brackley had the most bizarre notes. They were like some kind of Spike Milligan illustrations. They were slightly comedic. So each to their own. But Motti has got very, very neat, I really probably copied my style initially from Motti back in the late 17th century. Yeah. And by writing it out, and obviously I'm computer literate, and people sort of say, well, why don't you just put it on a spreadsheet? Yeah, but I am of a generation where I revised for school exams, university exams, by writing stuff out, and I guess that's how it filters into my thick head, really, just by copying it out. So I guess most of us do that. It's an old method, but I hope that I'm not a dated commentator. I don't think there's anybody else out there at the moment who commentates in meters and yards, and I don't commentate in meters to be down with the kids. We've got 4 kids in their 20s. They'd soon sort me out if they thought I was trying to impress anybody. But I think half the audience thinks in terms of meters. That's all. I mean, it's still the 18-yard box and stuff, but I think a shot comes in from 25 meters now. I think that's kind of how half the audience thinks. So as long as you relate to you, and obviously on terrestrial television, when the audience is really big for an England game, then you are talking to people between 99 and 9 and from all kinds of backgrounds and stuff. So you've got to try to serve as wide a breadth of audience as you can. And it's a little different on Sky and BT because essentially you've got 1 million or so hardcore football fans who are actually subscribing his or her money to watch football. So you can kind of commentate to the dressing room a little bit more. But in my mentor really in broadcasting, who was sadly not with us anymore, was a boxing commentator, Reg Guttridge, taught me probably 95% of what I know. And he used to talk about being inclusive and commentating to white van man, commentating to the public. Don't assume knowledge. The bigger the audience, the more you need to explain, the more you need to introduce things and people. And I think that's very, very sound thinking.
No, yeah, you actually took one of my questions straight away. I was actually going to say, do you need to? So very, very good. Very, very, very excellent foreshadowing. But I mean, obviously meters, yards. At least don't go with centimeters, Clive. I do think that might be a little step too.
Well, I'm not into kilos, really. Weirdly,
No.
I mean, I'm a total hypocrite because I'm not. But then I don't think as many people think in terms of kilos yet.
No.
It's happening, but I think people still talk about he's 12 stones and a forward, whatever. But then they'll probably say that he ran 20 meters. We are kind of in that. I mean, football cliches are interesting, and I try not to be lazy with the language. I don't say turn on a sixpence, simply because I just think that I don't think our four guys in their 20s would know what a sixpence was. So why would you? I think it's almost lazy to use phrases which just don't mean anything to most of your audience. So cliches are fine. A game of two halves, a game of two halves. There's no other way of saying it. There's no point trying to dress it up with some poetry from the inside of a greetings card or something. It is what it is. Ron Steele Woodstock does what it says on the tin. That's how that's good writing. It's good. It tells you that, and that's what a commentator should do. But I think you've always got to think about your audience, and maybe I'm fortunate in that I have these four good friends in my life who are all between sort of 24 and 29. So they kind of keep me current.
No, fantastic. I mean, you sort of touched on it there slightly, Clive. Actually, we all have particular styles, and you sort of ask a commentator what their particular style is. It sounds like more of a philosophical question. It's not. It's more of a sort of Peter Drury, as you say, maybe Peter Drury probably writes the greetings on the seasonal greetings on the cards. I mean, he is a literal poetic genius, and he could just do it off the top of the hat. He was talking actually to James, who also works with us last week or the week before, and he said that when he did the famous Roma have risen from their ruins, it was all improvised because he couldn't see. I think it was Manolas who got the third goal. He couldn't see that Manolas had scored. He was buying for time until he got to Manolas. So it's an incredible that he's very poetical. He's very, very much thinks that every word is very. It's a very, and you can always, he's very poetic in a sense. Some people like to go with facts, and some people like to go with elongated sounds at the end of names. So, for example, Martin Tyler Aguero, and it goes on for 5 minutes.
I think he only did it once, in fact.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. But
the best bit of that piece of commentary for me, and we do analyse our commentaries, and it is all a matter of opinion. Barry Davies once famously said, "One man's commentator is another man's pain in the arse," and it is. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. I think, as I say, you need to identify your audience. I don't think they should need to be bringing a thesaurus in front of the television. I think you should be talking essentially in a vocabulary that they understand. I think, the rhythm of the commentary should reflect the fact that they've invited you into their homes or onto their commute or wherever you are, and that, you don't want to become an annoyance. You don't want to push it. I don't think the great moments in sport don't need melodrama. They don't need dramatizing. They just need, what they do need for me is editorializing. I think you need to be a journalist. I think as a commentator, you should be able to interpret the significance of that moment for the viewer, and if you like, almost write tomorrow's headlines. I think that's important to do. But the style, I mean, you talk about Martin's commentary of the Aguero goal against Queen's Park Rangers. For me, it wasn't what he said. It wasn't Aguero that made that a great piece of commentary. It was, "I swear you will never see anything like this again." Now, that is a big call to make. Editorially, if you think about it, as he's saying it, he maybe halfway thinks, God, have I oversold this a little bit? Do you know he's right? He's absolutely okay. Michael Thomas, 1989. But that's how. And here's a man who would watch 4 games a day if he had the opportunity. He's an absolute football junkie. So he's watched lots and lots of football. And his editorial mind and that, his concentration brought that out of the locker at that time. And I think it stands up to this day and will stand up in in 20 years' time. Now, for me, that is good commentary. Is there a long word in there? Is there any poetry? No, but it is absolutely bang on what happened and the significance of it. That for me is commentary.
Yeah, I mean, you expressed that brilliantly. To be fair, mic drop. I think that was excellent. But what I'd ask you though, Clive, you know, you've all got those iconic goal calls. We're talking to Adam Summerton last week, and he says, or a few weeks ago, he said that when he was on, he commentated on the Panorama National League playoff final between Tranmere and Borough Wood, and he got the Tranmere, his goal call for the second Tranmere goal, the winner, resonated so much with the Tranmere fans that afterwards, and even to this day, they still say, "Oh, you know, you defined that goal for me. Every time I see that goal, I hear your voice," and it sort of goes in tandem with each other. And so he's very flattered by that. I imagine for you, Clive, I mean, there's so many, but the 99 Man United game. Have you ever had anyone? Well, you must have had people come to you and say, "Oh, Clive's voice with that goal. Can Man United score? They always score. Name on the trophy. Solskjaer has won it." Do you feel pride when that happens? Yeah.
That was my dad. That was my dad. I'm only 30. Yeah.
Oh,
you know that.
Yeah. No,
I wasn't.
Yeah. The power of moisturiser, Clive. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't quite know what to say about that really. It is nice to be part of people's memory. I mean, listen, 99% of the people that watch that game watch it on television. It was a television event. Okay, there were probably, I don't know, 50,000 Manchester United fans in Barcelona, but we had an audience of 20-something million that night. And yeah, I mean, it's lovely to be part of. I mean, I'll say this. Look, probably. When I said and Solskjaer has won it, I've actually broken the Cardinals' rule of commentary at that moment. And that very moment, I've committed the worst sin that a commentator probably can do, which is to call the winner across the line before the winning line. And if Bayern go down the other end and equalise, and it goes to extra time, and they win the shootout, which they would have done, then I'd have probably been found hanging from a lamppost outside the Arndale Centre on the Thursday night, you know. So you get lucky. You get lucky. You can get lucky with, you know, whatever, Wayne Rooney, remember the name, and all that stuff. It's fine, but you need the material to work with. I mean, you can't. I mean, that was a pretty rubbish final, to be honest, until the last 10 minutes. The first goal of the game, I got wrong. I thought it was deflected. Peter Schmeichel, I'd never forgiven him to this day because I didn't believe that free kick could be Peter Schmeichel unless it had been deflected. So I got, you know, the biggest game at the end of my first season in succession to the late great Brian Moore. They give me a 20 million audience, and with 3 minutes to go, it's going to finish 1-0. It's going to be a damp squib, and I got the goal wrong. And 3 minutes later, you're talking about probably the most important 3 minutes of my broadcast career. So you get lucky sometimes.
Oh, the gods are on your side there, Clive, and I'm sure you certainly deserve it. I mean, you know, going through all of those games, that's a classic. Of course, Istanbul, for an entertainment perspective, even more so. I mean, okay, in a way, I've done this spontaneously on purpose because it makes it again, commentary is a spontaneous thing. It's in the moment that you pick there and then. So right now, off the top of your head, worst and best game that you've commentated on in your career?
I don't do worst and best. I'm sorry. I think football belongs in its moment. I think our job is why is football wonderful? You never quite know when it's going to happen. And the 99 final and the 05 final are fantastic examples of that. There was absolutely no sign whatsoever of a Liverpool comeback, none whatsoever. Milan picked up at the start of the second half exactly how they finished the first half. You know, Dudek he made an incredible save in extra time, but probably his best technical save was made in the opening minutes of the second half, you know, to stop it being 4-0. So there is it's football bloody hell, the greatest post-match interview ever given. You know, the most successful manager of the modern era in British football. Don't ask me how that happened. I don't know. Football bloody hell. So your job as a commentator is I sometimes say it's a staring competition. You have got to watch so intently, because in the blink of an eye you can miss something. I had one of the best seats in the house for the 2006 World Cup final. Zinedine Zidane is one of my very favourite players of the modern era. He was sent off. I hadn't got a clue why. No idea. I didn't see it. I know a lot of people didn't see it. It happened 15 metres away from where the ball was at the time. But suddenly he's walking off the field. I'm commentating live. And I'm just going, replay, please, 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 please. I have no idea what's happened here. So it is. You can get lucky, you can get unlucky. Biggest test really of a commentator is concentration. You've got to watch the game. I'm told there are certain commentators, co-commentators who tweet. You've got to look. You've got to look at your device to tweet. You cannot look away. You can't.
No.
Football doesn't allow you to do that, because it is about moments, and our job is to capture those moments. And if we manage to get lucky to capture them, then our signature will be on those moments forever and a day. And that's what you're talking about, really.
No, yeah, no, again, some really fantastic insight there, and really well summarised. I love it when I ask a question like that and you answer so brilliantly by not answering it, but incredibly good.
Honestly, it's up to other people.
I agree with you. So everything's subjective in football as well, isn't it? Like you say, everything's subjective. Everything is in the moment. You can have a really, as you say, a really dull game with a fantastic climax, and you can also have a thoroughly entertaining game, and both of them can be equally as good as each other in their own right. And obviously, I'd say England-Iceland, by the way, for a negative game. That I was watching that and I thought, oh my goodness.
Well, there's another good example of something. I mean, Roy Hodgson is a really good friend of mine. My wonderful wife, who you caught a glimpse of a moment ago, we've been out to dinner, Roy and Sheila and Susan and I, and you would love his company.
Oh, I imagine so.
Much as he is absolutely ensconced in football, you can have dinner with Roy and Sheila Hodgson and not mention football all night. He's well read, he's well travelled, he is a fascinating guy. And he was a wonderful assistance to me during that tournament. Gary Neville was on his staff, who's a good friend, and somebody, again, I've got high regard for. So in terms of briefings and information and background, and I had two mates there who were staring down the barrel at losing their job. And quite apart from everything else that's happening in front of 20-odd million people, how on earth England are losing this game? I actually had my editor, who's another very good friend, say in my ear, because he knew the personal relationship, around about 90 minutes, you're going to have to call this, and I just went back on the button, and we are only 2-1 down. I'm not going to go too early. But the board went up 3 minutes, and in the second minute stoppage time, I said, and this will make Roy Hodgson's position as England manager untenable. It wasn't controversial. Roy had handed in his resignation almost before everybody had shaken hands. He knew he had to go. But it is difficult when you have that personal association. And who do I support? I support my mates. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of friends in the game. I know their families. I know I've been to the children's weddings and fathers' funerals and I mean there is an attachment, obviously, when you're having to call something against somebody that is well, B, is good, and will have done everything he possibly can to make this go the other way, but he's failed, he or she has failed, and they're out, and it's a difficult call to make.
No, very classic response there, to be fair, and I didn't really think about that, but of course, it must be very difficult in those circumstances. But on a slightly separate note, well, as we sort of alluded to just before we actually went on recording for this, you're a huge voice in one of the biggest games, video games in the world globally. Still is. You're not on it now, but you were not too long ago. FIFA. For better or for worse, in many people who played its eyes, the quintessential football game that released annually every year. You came into it in the late noughties, didn't you? I think.
No, much earlier than that.
Really?
Yeah.
John Watson, there a time, wasn't there?
Yeah. I round about 2000 to about 13, 14, and were probably the last ones I recorded. Might have been on the game for another year or so.
Yeah.
No, I took it over quite early. Let me think. My son was born in 95. Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, he might be maybe 01, 02. He was just about playing FIFA when he was playing FIFA when I started to do it. So I probably had more of an appreciation of what the game represented. And, you know, there was a spell, even when ITV had all the Champions League and stuff, when I was probably better known as the voice of FIFA than I was the voice of ITV football. And that, I can give you a couple of stories. I mean, I remember the parents, you know, of the guys in my son's class. Oh, we've been listening to your bloody weekend, your bloody voice resounding around our house. And it is a bit weird because kids play FIFA, or people play FIFA 6-8 hours on the run. And Susan and I went on a fabulous holiday to the Middle East about 6 years ago, and one night or 2 nights we spent kind of under canvas in a desert in Jordan, quite a well-known desert called Wadi Rum. And you get met at this sort of reception area by this kind of Bedouin guy who drives you in his rickety Jeep out to and leaves you you know, to fend for yourself for a couple of nights. And he picked us up, and we could hardly hear each other over the sound of the Jeep, but he brought his 2 kids, and they're in the back. And I was chatting away, and I was talking quite loudly because over the voice. And one of them said something to him in a language I didn't understand. And he looked at me and he said, "They say you sound like the man on FIFA." And so I turned around and I said, "It's a very good afternoon." Now, what's the reach of FIFA? A Bedouin tribe in southern Jordan recognized my voice. I mean, that is FIFA. Phenomenal. And it is. And I mean, the good thing is, I think I helped improve it. I rewrote the script completely. It's made in Vancouver. The script that I inherited, there are quite a few British guys out there, but it had a few goaltenders and goal minders in it, the script. And it also had sort of shots bursting the onion bag and all that kind of trite rubbish, which the poetic stuff, you know, which I fine if you hear them once, you know, with a late winner in whatever it was, Rome. But if you're hearing them every 12 minutes when you're playing loads of feet, they're actually, so what I've tried to say, you need a soundtrack which is more authentic, it's more credible. So one that isn't going to get in the way of what is essentially a visual experience. And I said, you need to improve your gameplay, because my 8-year-old tells me that Pro Evo's you've got all the licenses, but the gameplay, and they did. And I think, you know, I think that's where they made huge advances. I think they toned down the soundtrack. I rewrote the entire script so that it was more natural, more normal. And they worked on the gameplay. They kept the licenses and you know, became absolutely preeminent in that market. And it's still a big part of a lot of people's lives.
No, for sure. I mean, how hard is it though, Clive, to get a script that much? Because you've got to be generic without being too generic. You can't just be like, oh, and the 2 teams are well, there are a few like that, but again, it's got to have a certain level of detail. But you can't do too much detail because you'd be there for 5 years doing the script.
Well, the AI does it for you, but you've got to understand the sequencing of it. And commentators have got fairly kind of anal brains. And I did manage to get my head around the fact that I always describe it as you start like a restart, like a corner. And the corner is the head of the family. And then you have like this family tree, which builds out from it. And you have a short corner and a long corner. And then on the next part of the family, on the short corner side, you have a high one and a low one, whatever. And what you have to do is write 10 alternatives ways of saying, so for the original one, you say corner, then it's a corner. And so literally you sit there in a recording studio in Wardour Street in West London for, it used to be 5 days, 8-hour sessions. I mean, on the days when you did the players, you just came out with no voice. You just came out exhausted, screaming names all day long. I started to mix the recordings up so that we had the players shouting on each day towards the end of the day, because the danger was that my voice would sound totally different on Monday than it did by Friday afternoon. And so when the AI linked together all the different commentators, it almost sounded like 3 different commentators at different times of the week. So yeah, you put a bit of thought into it and try to make it sound as good as you possibly can. And actually just sound as authentic as possible. That's all I ever wanted it to do.
Did you enjoy it?
I have to say it was probably, I mean, there's no part of my job which you can honestly say is hard work, really, because it's what I always wanted to do. But it's probably the hardest I worked that week. Really? It's certainly the worst I felt at the end of the week. It just felt wiped out. I felt as if I'd been in an argument, a 5-day argument.
Did you have some throat soothers with you? Because they
were like some stormy marriage. It's like the end of some stormy marriage. You know?
Oh, don't.
No, game's gotta go. Get out of here. I'm gone. I'm going.
That's amazing.
What's an analogy?
It was very, very good, like the end of a long and turbulent marriage.
Like
there we
being
go.
Married to Madonna.
Yeah. Honestly, playing it, I feel like that sometimes. The way the game's gone these days, my word, not quite as into it as some of the young kids, but goodness me. Just a quick final 2 questions, then, Clive. One on, you touched on it before actually about the Premier League and how you've been got yourself involved in commentating on that recently. I think it was for NBC, wasn't it? Quite recently, you did a couple of games for NBC.
I've done NBC, Amazon, and TalkSport, of course.
Yeah, TalkSport. Yeah, of course, yeah. So you NBC for the television, TalkSport for the radio. Is there any particular reason why you didn't get involved in? I mean, you have been involved in Premier League, but why you didn't want it to be a mainstay? Maybe like Martin Tyler, for example, or someone from Sky. Or were you happy with your free weekend?
Yeah, it's just where the contracts are, really. I rejoined ITV in '92, which I went to the Beeb in '92, came back to ITV in '96, and we had Champions League then. We took on England in spells, and then for a long spell we had bits of the Premiership, the famous Premiership. We've had we've had the FA Cup for spells and stuff. So there was always enough stuff. And because I graduated, because Mauro retired in '98, and I became, senior commentator, number 1, whatever you want to call it. It would have taken something fairly extraordinary for me to want to work for somebody else. Sure. I mean, how long's Martin been at Sky? I mean, they're probably the same kind of period.
Time,
so,
90s, early 90s.
Yeah, so they've always had their senior commentator. I've just been very happy where I am, really. It's only in the last few years that ITV's rights have been cut down, essentially. We lost Champions League.
Yeah.
The first Champions League final that I hadn't been to from '98 through to Liverpool's defeat to Real Madrid in '18. I went to every Champions League final. Yeah. 19 was the first one I didn't attend. I commentated that off tube for an overseas broadcaster from London. Funny enough.
Was it like the cancelled Christmas?
Well, it was a blow, and I think it's a big debate about how marginalised football's become. There's never been a Premier League game free to air. Never ever. No. It's an extraordinary thought.
It's
really,
crazy.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
1992. Yeah. And if you wanted to watch a live Premier League game, you've had to pay for it since then. And you've only got to look at, I've got so much respect for so many people who work for Sky and for BT. And I think, actually, it's important to have sports channels so that you have that choice. But you've only got to look at the viewing figures for an England game on ITV, or for a fairly ordinary FA Cup tie live on the BBC. With maybe even if there's a big team involved, they've got half a team out. They routinely get in 8 and 10 million people. Well, an absolute super duper Sunday afternoon is only going to do 2 million on Sky. Now, that is, it's a bit of a conundrum, and I think this pandemic actually. We're surrounded in a football community where every day on our Twitter feed and, maybe with the mates that we talk to, I can't wait for it to be back. That might not be the case outside of our circle.
Mm.
There is just a chance that once you start to learn to do without something, you learn to do without it. I think football's taken its public for granted for a long, long time. And it's probably just about the clientele which is most loyal to the brand of just about any industry in the country, in the world. Be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see. Particularly given we might be away off another season ticket being sold.
Yeah.
There may not even be season tickets sold for next season. Who knows what situation we're going to be in. People won't. People haven't. I mean, we've missed it. You and I have missed it because we work in it. How much has the country really missed football? It's a rhetorical question. I hope the answer is very much indeed. I really do. But I just wonder. I'd be interested to see what the take-up is on things like Sky subscriptions. If we find, in September that next season is going to be curtailed, or it's going to be played behind closed doors, some of it, or whatever. It's there are a lot of businesses in crisis, far bigger crisis than football. Yeah. But football might have to face up to a new reality.
Oh no, I mean, there's a lot of interesting thoughts you posed there, and the only way we'll get those answered is through see what happens in the future, I guess. And as you say, I hope that does happen. Just as I say, I did say too, last question, because his name hasn't been mentioned, and I know that lots of people, associated with yourself on the commentary box. You've obviously had co-commentators like David Pleat and Glenn Hoddle and so on and so on. But there's one name that sticks out to me, and Jim Beglin, of course, love Jim, is Andy Townsend. I mean, Clive and Andy on the ITV all those years. I mean, for me growing up, it was always Clive and Andy, Peter and Jim. Peter and Jim still do quite a lot together for the World League. But obviously, Clive and Andy all the way through many of the Champions League games. Is he someone you consider a really good friend outside? Because obviously on the box, we all imagine, you great duo, get on so well, seem like great chemistry between the two of you. I was talking to Ian Dark, it's Ian Dark and Steve McManaman, Martin Tyler, and now it's Martin Tyler and Gary Neville. It used to be Martin Tyler and Andy Gray. But for you, it seemed to be yourself and Andy Townsend. Do we have a few words on Andy? What do you make of him? Good friend? Good colleague?
In the top 3 storytellers in football, great company. Yeah, great friend. I mean, I don't. If I said I miss him, I mean, Glenn Hoddle is such a wonderful human being. I probably do, and I nearly lost him the year before last now. But and I'm in touch with them all. I mean, Jim Beglin. I mean, again, know the families of all of these people. David Pleat, I've had quite a few conversations with during this because his wife's not great and not very well, and he always wants to talk. But big role and stuff. So, but Andy, of all of them, probably the closest in terms of a mate. And as I say, this is the greatest job in the world, but during the tournament, when you're on the road, there are a lot of early alarms, there are a lot of late flights, there are a lot of traffic jams, and you are tied at the waist together day after day, hotel after hotel, week after week, and you need to get on. You do need to get on. And we were a real married couple, and I absolutely love him. He's a great guy. He's everything you would hope he would be. I mean, sometimes people ask me about what's he like, what's he really like. Gareth Southgate. I mean, Gareth Southgate, everything you think he is, that's what he is. That is exactly the person that he is. And Andy T is exactly the same. He is the same, but wonderful raconteur, great storyteller.
No, I imagine absolutely, and honestly, funnily, I've talked to my friends, and he's come up with some iconic phrases. One of which, "Not for me, Clive," I still use whenever I don't want. Oh, not for me, Clive, and I use that without even thinking about it. And that is such an iconic phrase that I used to say quite a lot. In and around 6-yard box, I use less so because that's more of a football term. But not for me, Clive.
I'm writing my book. I'm writing my book at the moment. Nearly finished it. What's it called?
Not for me, Clive.
Not for me, Clive.
Oh, There you go, Andy Townsend. Andy Townsend's the true poet that we were talking about all that time ago. Fantastic, Zane. I really enjoyed this. It's been a privilege for me. Thoroughly brilliant chat, not just on football, but also politics and the wider world. So yeah, I mean, wow, absolute privilege, Clive. Wonderful to hear that all of your stories, and I wish you all the best, not just for the future, but in the next hour when you've got Talk Sport. So I will wish you all the best regardless. But take care. Is there anything you'd like to...
From Bentley to Hawkesby and Jacobs.
Is there anything you'd like to say just to anyone who's listening, you know, just as a generalization? Anything?
The views you've just heard are personal. I hope you're aware that I know that I'm so lucky to do the job that I do, and to meet the people that I have met through it, some of whom have had an extraordinary influence on the way. I mean, when you're among the very, very best in a sport which is such a meritocracy, you've just got to, there's only one qualification to play football. You've got to be good enough. You can't, you know, millionaires, billionaires can buy football clubs. They can't buy their way into football teams. You've just simply got to be good enough. And so when you think how many people want to be footballers, you know, and even the guys who are playing Championship League One are in that absolute elite ability-wise footballers who make a living out of it. And so when you get to the very top, and you're fortunate enough to meet some of the people that I've spent time with, they are extreme people. They've got to be. You know, they've got to be different from anybody else you've ever met. You know, from the first ones that I spent time with, Bill Shankly and Brian Clough and so on, with Fergie, and you know, now with you know, being around the likes of Mourinho and Klopp and Guardiola. You can't really judge them by the standards of other people, their behavior, anything, because they're extremely successful and extremely focused, extremely competitive. They are absolute extreme human beings. And it's just amazing to get close to them and even get to know some of them and try to work out what has made it. A lot of people have been watching The Last Dance in the last few weeks, you know, and it is extraordinary when you see so much of somebody who's reached the top of the tree that so many people are trying to climb. And I have a daily fascination with the people I meet and talk to who've reached the top in football. And I'm just, you know, yeah, of course I'm lucky to make a living out of doing something I want to do, but probably even luckier to have actually just spent, you know, precious time with these extraordinary people. And I hope that as a communicator that I'm able, what's my job? To meet these people and tell the rest of you what they're like. That is kind of what we do as journalists, to have that privileged position and then be able to relate it to people who want to meet them. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to come up with great lines or poetry or anything of that nature. I'm just trying to communicate.
Oh, mic drop.